What if I told you that some of the greatest action thrillers ever made were buried, not because they failed, but because Star Wars changed everything? When Star Wars hit theaters in 1977, it wasn't just a box office smash. It was a tidal wave, the kind that changes everything. Today we're going back, not to Tatooine, but to the back alleys, jungles, city streets, and underground rings of 1970s cinema. Here are 16 forgotten or underappreciated action thrillers that either got buried by Star Wars or were made in its looming aftermath. Watch your step. The explosions are real. Sorcerer, 1977. When you hear Sorcerer, you might expect wizards or fantasy. What you get instead is pure adrenaline. Directed by William Friedkin right after The Exorcist, this is a brutal survival thriller wrapped in diesel fumes and sweat. The story follows four men, all running from something, who are hired to transport unstable dynamite through the South American jungle. The conditions are lethal. The terrain is even worse. One false bump, and it's all over. Production was legendary for its madness. Crews collapsed from heat stroke. Friedkin lost weight and nearly lost his sanity. But what he crafted was a masterclass in tension. It builds like a fuse, slow and relentless. A single bridge crossing scene will make you forget to breathe. Released just 1 month after Star Wars, Sorcerer didn't stand a chance. Audiences wanted adventure, not existential dread in the jungle. It bombed hard, making back only a fraction of its budget. But over time, its legacy grew. Today, directors like Tarantino and Scorsese call it one of the greatest thrillers ever made. It didn't have lightsabers, it had guts. And that's exactly why it still hits hard. The French Connection, 1971. Before car chases became CGI showcases, there was The French Connection. This film doesn't just have action, it defines it. Directed by William Friedkin, the same man behind Sorcerer, this film follows hard-boiled detective Popeye Doyle as he uncovers a major heroin smuggling ring from France to New York. It's gritty, grounded, and refuses to blink. The chase under the train tracks? Iconic. But it's not the spectacle that matters. It's the tension. You feel the pulse of the city, the cold breath of winter on steel. Every sound, every shadow becomes part of the chase. Gene Hackman delivers a performance that's equal parts furious and unhinged. He's not a superhero. He's not even likable. But he's relentless. The film won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. But even that didn't protect it from fading into the background once science fiction took over theaters later in the decade. Studios started thinking bigger: galaxies, empires, starships. But The French Connection proved that sometimes the most thrilling story is 2 men in a dirty city, chasing something you can't quite touch. Rolling Thunder, 1977. There's a certain kind of quiet rage that only comes from survival. Rolling Thunder is a film soaked in it. Released the same year as Star Wars, this gritty revenge thriller follows Major Charles Raine, a Vietnam War veteran who comes home to a parade and a prize, a silver coin collection and a smile. But the smile doesn't last. When his family is brutally attacked and he's left broken, what follows is not recovery. It's retribution. This isn't loud action. It's slow burn. A man who's been trained to kill, now with nothing to lose. William Devane plays Raine like a human time bomb, all tight jaw and silent fury. When he teams up with a fellow vet, played by a young Tommy Lee Jones, the final act is a violent release years in the making. The film's intensity turned off mainstream audiences. It was too quiet, too grim, too focused on trauma instead of triumph. And after Star Wars, no one wanted pain in their stories. They wanted hope. So Rolling Thunder vanished into the background, passed over by critics, ignored by ticket buyers. But the film lived on in the corners. Tarantino would later praise it, name a distribution company after it. Because Rolling Thunder doesn't need lasers or aliens, it has something far scarier: a man who has nothing left and the patience to wait for payback. 3 Days of the Condor, 1975. Paranoia never looked this stylish. In 3 Days of the Condor, Robert Redford plays a CIA analyst who returns from a lunch break to find his entire office slaughtered. From that moment on, he's not just running, he's unraveling. Every phone call, every person, every quiet corner might be a trap. And there's no manual for survival when you don't even know who the enemy is. Director Sidney Pollack turns New York into a chessboard of secrets and shadows. The film blends espionage with existential dread. There are no gadgets, no big explosions, just a man who thought he was doing harmless research and suddenly finds himself at the center of a conspiracy so large it doesn't even need a face. Redford is magnetic here, caught between innocence and intelligence. His chemistry with Faye Dunaway adds layers, as trust becomes another weapon neither of them can afford to misplace. It's the kind of thriller that whispers instead of shouts, but the tension is razor sharp. When Star Wars arrived, thrillers like this seemed outdated, too quiet, too real. But in today's world of surveillance and digital footprints, 3 Days of the Condor feels more modern than ever. The questions it raises about control, corruption, and the cost of knowledge still sting. And Redford's run through the cold city streets, it still haunts. The Driver, 1978. He doesn't have a name, he doesn't say much, but when he's behind the wheel, no one can touch him. The Driver, directed by Walter Hill, is a stripped-down masterpiece of mood and motion. It follows a getaway driver whose precision is legendary, and a detective determined to catch him no matter what it takes. This isn't a movie full of backstory. There are no flashbacks, no long-winded monologues, just a series of chases, each more intense than the last. Every movement, every turn of the wheel feels intentional. It's a dance of speed and silence. Ryan O'Neal plays the driver like a ghost, untouchable, unreadable, but always moving forward. Bruce Dern's detective is the perfect counterweight, loud, brash, obsessed. The cat-and-mouse game between the two is as psychological as it is physical. It's not about who's faster, it's about who breaks first. Released in a time when audiences were falling in love with space battles and swashbuckling farm boys, The Driver didn't stand a chance. Too minimal, too cold. But for those who discovered it later, it became a touchstone. Nicholas Winding Refn would cite it as a key influence for Drive. Michael Mann would draw from its icy tone. The Driver doesn't explain itself. It doesn't apologize. It just grips the wheel, hits the gas, and disappears into the night, leaving only tire smoke and stunned silence behind. The Yakuza, 1974. Some debts can't be paid with money. The Yakuza is a story about honor, obligation, and the violence that lingers between two cultures. When an American private investigator returns to Japan to rescue a friend's kidnapped daughter, he finds himself pulled back into a world he thought he'd left behind. A world of ancient codes, silent warriors, and blood promises that still demand payment. Robert Mitchum leads with quiet power. His face says more than most scripts. He's a man out of place, out of time, and still trying to do what's right, even if it costs him everything. The film's heart lies in his connection with an old friend-turned-rival, a former Yakuza who now walks the path of tradition, sacrifice, and steel. Directed by Sidney Pollack and co-written by Paul Schrader, the mind behind Taxi Driver. The Yakuza is more than a gangster film. It's a meditation on duty. The sword fights are brutal, the tension is thick, but it's the emotional weight that leaves a mark. Every scar has a story, every choice, a consequence. At the box office, it struggled. Viewers didn't know what to make of it. Too American to be Japanese, too Japanese to be American. And by the time it reached theaters, the winds of cinema had shifted. People wanted simplicity. This film gave them silence, reflection, and pain. But if you sit with it, the Yakuza rewards you. It's patient, and when the final blade drops, it's unforgettable. Big Bad Mama, 1974. This isn't your usual crime caper. Big Bad Mama takes the Bonnie and Clyde formula, turns up the volume, and lets it loose on the back roads of Depression-era America. Angie Dickinson stars as Wilma McClatchy, a mother who decides she's done with scraping by and sets off on a crime spree with her 2 daughters in tow. What follows is chaos, and a whole lot of fun. They rob banks, outrun the law, and break every rule in the book. But underneath the wild shootouts and speeding cars, there's a strange kind of heart. It's not just about rebellion, it's about freedom, about a woman refusing to live by the role society tried to hand her. Angie Dickinson owns the screen. She's fearless, charming, and unpredictable. And when a smooth-talking con man played by William Shatner shows up, things get even messier. The chemistry, the tension, the betrayals, it's all wrapped in a haze of dust, gunpowder, and roaring engines. Released in the wake of Bonnie and Clyde and ahead of Star Wars, Big Bad Mama carved its own path. It didn't try to look pretty. It didn't aim for big themes. It just went for it. Bold, brash, and unapologetic. And in a decade where films often took themselves too seriously, that was its own kind of rebellion. It may not have had the polish of Hollywood blockbusters, but it had soul, and a whole lot of firepower. Coffee, 1973. Before revenge became a genre, it had a face, and her name was Coffee. Played by Pam Grier in a star-making performance, this film doesn't waste time. A nurse by day, vigilante by night, Coffee sets out to clean up the streets after her younger sister falls victim to drugs and corruption. And when she goes to war, she brings everything with her, from sawed-off shotguns to unshakable fury. This isn't cartoon violence. It's raw, personal. Every fight means something. Every takedown feels earned. Coffee doesn't hide in the shadows. She walks straight into danger, daring anyone to stop her. And Pam Grier doesn't just play the role, she owns it. With every line, every glare, she rewrites what it means to be an action star. Directed by Jack Hill, the film mixes street grit with style. It's fast-paced, brutal, and doesn't flinch. Yes, it's part of the blaxploitation wave, but Coffee rises above the label. It has purpose, rage, and clarity. In the 70s, before heroes flew or wore capes, this was the kind of justice audiences got. Messy, grounded, and on fire. But when space fantasies took over, films like Coffee got pushed aside. Too intense, too political, too real. But she never left. Today, Coffee is studied, quoted, and revered. Because when a film is this bold, this direct, it doesn't fade. It burns. Thriller, A Cruel Picture, 1973. There are films that entertain, and then there are films that confront. Thriller. A Cruel Picture does not ask for your comfort. It doesn't want your approval. It takes revenge and strips it bare. This Swedish cult classic tells the story of a young woman, rendered mute after a childhood trauma, who's taken and exploited by people who see her as disposable. What they don't see is what she's becoming, something unrelenting. Christina Lindberg plays her with haunting silence. Every stare, every motion is part of a transformation, from victim to weapon. She trains herself in martial arts, firearms, and driving. She doesn't speak a word, but her actions roar, and when she finally turns the tables, the film delivers action scenes that are cold, hypnotic, and shockingly brutal. The cinematography flirts with the poetic, then slams back into the grindhouse reality. There are slow-motion gunfights, striking compositions, and long stretches with no dialogue, just the tension of a reckoning in progress. It's art house meets vengeance, and the collision is unforgettable. Banned in several countries upon release, Thriller was never meant for mass audiences. And in a post-Star Wars world of fantasy and hope, its presence barely made a ripple. It was too much, too rough, too raw, too unflinching. But that's what makes it legendary. Tarantino later cited it as a key influence on Kill Bill. Fans of underground cinema kept it alive, whispering its name in video store aisles and late-night film forums. It's not an easy watch. It's not supposed to be. But for those who can handle its darkness, Thriller is a cinematic scar, and scars don't fade. The Odessa File, 1974. Some enemies don't hide in shadows. They hide in history. The Odessa File is a thriller that dares to chase the past before it disappears. Based on the novel by Frederick Forsyth, the film follows a young journalist who stumbles upon the diary of a Holocaust survivor. Inside is a trail, and at the end of it, a former Nazi officer living under a new name. What begins as curiosity becomes obsession. What was just a story becomes a manhunt. Jon Voight stars as Peter Miller, and his performance carries the entire film. He isn't a superhero. He isn't driven by personal tragedy or revenge. He's driven by something rarer, moral clarity, and that makes the danger feel even more real. Every time he gets closer, the noose tightens. You don't know who to trust. Every friendly face might be hiding a war criminal's soul. The film moves deliberately, peeling back layers like a puzzle. It builds a world where justice feels just out of reach, and the cost of truth is steep. It's a thriller made of paper trails, secret networks, and chilling silences. Released during a time when audiences were drifting toward escapism, the Odessa File stood out. And not in a way the studios appreciated. It demanded patience, it rewarded attention. But it didn't sparkle. It didn't soar through space or feature chosen ones. It stayed grounded. And that made it invisible in a year flooded with spectacle. But time has a way of circling back. Today, the Odessa File feels more urgent than ever. When history threatens to be rewritten, stories like this remind us that the past is never as far away as we think, and sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is look. Hard Times, 1975. A man walks into town. No money, no friends, just fists. That's how Hard Times begins, and that's all it needs. Set during the Great Depression, this film stars Charles Bronson as Cheney, a bare-knuckle fighter who takes his chances in illegal street matches. He doesn't talk much. He doesn't need to. Every punch speaks for him. Walter Hill's directorial debut is lean and mean. There's no filler, no subplots to distract from the real story. A man trying to survive in a world that's already forgotten how to care. Bronson plays Cheney with stone-faced intensity. At nearly 55, he wasn't anyone's idea of a rising action star. But when he steps into the ring, the screen crackles. You believe it. James Coburn plays Speed, the fast-talking promoter who sees gold in Cheney's quiet brutality. The two form an uneasy alliance, clashing as often as they cooperate. The film's world is filled with gamblers, crooks, and broken men just trying to get by. It's not glamorous, it's not heroic, but it's honest. Hard Times didn't try to compete with the bombast of other action films. It stayed close to the ground. It was about bruises, not battles. Pain, not power. And that's probably why it got left behind when flashier films filled the marquee. When audiences were being sold space battles and special effects, a movie about two men fighting for a few bucks didn't seem big enough. But that's the point. Hard Times isn't about saving the world. It's about surviving it. And sometimes that's the hardest fight of all. Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, 1974. There's a sweet spot where crime, friendship, and chaos collide. Thunderbolt and Lightfoot lives there. Directed by Michael Cimino before The Deer Hunter, this film blends action, humor, and heartbreak into a road movie that doesn't play by the rules. It stars Clint Eastwood as Thunderbolt, a veteran thief on the run, and Jeff Bridges as Lightfoot, a wild, wide-eyed drifter with charm to spare. From the first scene, it's unpredictable. 1 minute they're dodging bullets, the next, they're stealing cars and sharing laughs. But beneath the surface, something real is building. A bond. It's not quite father and son, not quite friends, something in between. Bridges brings youthful energy, while Eastwood plays it cool, calculating, tired of the past, but unable to escape it. They set their sights on a heist, one big enough to buy a future. But like all great crime stories, plans crumble, loyalties fray, and the road runs out faster than expected. The film flips between tones with ease. One moment light, the next dangerous. And when it lands its final punch, it lingers. When it was released, audiences didn't know what to make of it. It wasn't a full comedy. It wasn't a shootout fest. It was in between. And then Star Wars arrived, offering clean heroes, clear stakes, and a galaxy where good and evil were easy to name. Films like Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, full of messy people and uncertain outcomes, faded from the spotlight. But time was kind to it. Critics came around, Bridges earned an Oscar nomination, and today, its charm is impossible to miss. It's a reminder that sometimes the best action stories aren't about explosions. They're about the people holding the matches. Marathon Man, 1976. It starts slow. A graduate student jogging through New York. Books, classes, ordinary days. But in Marathon Man, nothing stays ordinary for long. Dustin Hoffman plays Babe, a man pulled into a deadly web of lies and espionage after his brother, a secret agent, is murdered. From that moment, running is no longer a hobby. It's survival. The film spirals quickly, turning city streets into traps and every stranger into a potential threat. Hoffman's performance is raw. He's not a spy. He's not trained. He's just a man in the wrong place with nowhere to go. And the more he runs, the more the walls close in. But it's Sir Laurence Olivier who delivers the most chilling role. He plays Zell, a former war criminal with a soft voice and cold eyes. He doesn't need to shout. He just asks one question. Is it safe? That line, repeated with surgical menace, became a piece of film legend, a reminder that true terror doesn't need to be loud. Director John Schlesinger builds tension like a wire pulled tight. The violence isn't flashy, it's shocking, sudden, and always earned. The pacing is patient, but the payoff is brutal. When it landed in theaters, Marathon Man was a hit, but its legacy didn't shine the way it should have. Just a year later, Star Wars would change the rules. Audiences wanted laser swords and chosen ones, not paranoia and dentistry nightmares. Marathon Man wasn't escapism, it was confrontation. But that's what made it great. It's a reminder that action doesn't always need armies. Sometimes it's just one man, running, breaking, fighting, until there's nothing left but the truth. And a question that still echoes. Is it safe? The Omega Man, 1971. The streets are empty, buildings abandoned, shadows stretch longer than they should. In The Omega Man, Charlton Heston plays Robert Neville, possibly the last man alive after a plague wipes out most of humanity. He drives through a silent Los Angeles, guns at the ready, eyes scanning the ruins. But he's not alone. At night, they come. The family. Former humans twisted by the plague into a cult of light-hating zealots. Dressed in robes, faces hidden, they want Neville gone. Not just because he's different, but because he reminds them of what they lost. He still holds on to science, order, hope. They've embraced chaos. Based loosely on Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, the film blends science fiction and action with eerie quiet. Heston carries most scenes alone, and his solitude is the real villain. Sure, there are shootouts, explosions, but the real war is internal. One man trying to stay sane in a world that doesn't want him. The film reflects the fear of its era: biological disaster, loss of control, and isolation. Released in the early 70s, it was a hit with cult audiences, but never gained the prestige of other end-of-the-world films. And by the time Star Wars rolled in, the kind of bleak, slow-burning apocalypse Omega Man offered felt outdated. Still, its influence is massive. You can feel its DNA in films like 28 Days Later, I Am Legend, and even The Walking Dead. It showed what the end might look like, not with monsters or meteors, but with silence. The Omega Man doesn't yell. It waits, watches. And when the sun goes down, it reminds you that loneliness might be the scariest enemy of all. Get Carter, 1971. Some men don't ask questions. They just act. Get Carter is one of those stories where vengeance isn't a plot device. It's a pulse. Michael Caine plays Jack Carter, a London gangster who returns to his hometown of Newcastle to bury his brother. But something doesn't sit right. The cause of death. The silence. The fear in people's eyes. Carter doesn't accept lies, so he starts digging. What follows is one of the most unrelenting revenge thrillers of the 1970s. There are no grand speeches, no sweeping emotional arcs. Just one man slicing through layers of corruption, violence, and betrayal with cold precision. Caine's performance is ice. He walks into every room like he already owns it. He doesn't shout. He doesn't plead. He just moves, like a shadow with a plan. Director Mike Hodges doesn't flinch. The cinematography captures a bleak industrial England, all gray skies and brick walls. It feels claustrophobic, oppressive. Even the music is sparse, letting the tension speak for itself. The violence isn't stylized. It's fast, dirty, over before you can process it. When Get Carter was released, it shocked critics. Too violent, too emotionless, too bleak. But for those who stuck with it, it became a defining moment in British crime cinema. It didn't try to entertain. It told the truth. And the truth is rarely pretty. Of course, once Star Wars changed the cinematic landscape, a film like Get Carter didn't stand a chance. Studios wanted heroes you could root for. Jack Carter doesn't ask for sympathy. He barely asks for understanding. He just does what needs doing. And when he's done, there's no applause, no redemption, just silence. The French Connection 2, 1975. Most sequels try to go bigger, louder. This one goes deeper. The French Connection 2 doesn't pick up where the first left off. It throws Popeye Doyle into a whole new nightmare. This time, he's in Marseille, alone, out of place, and chasing ghosts through foreign streets. The swagger is gone, the comfort of home is gone, and what's left is raw determination. Gene Hackman returns with a performance even more intense than in the first film. Popeye isn't just tracking drug dealers, he's falling apart. Kidnapped and forcefully addicted, he's pushed to the edge, then clawing his way back. The middle act, where he suffers through withdrawal, is one of the most grueling sequences ever put on film. No music, no flashbacks, just pain. Director John Frankenheimer doesn't glamorize the story. The camera stays close. The frames feel suffocating. The action, when it hits, is desperate. Doyle isn't some slick super cop. He's tired, angry, stubborn, and he won't stop. Unlike the first film, French Connection 2 wasn't a major hit. Maybe it was too dark, too messy. Or maybe, by 1975, people were already drifting towards something else. Cleaner worlds with clearer rules. Within 2 years, Star Wars would land like a meteor and erase the appetite for stories like this. But French Connection 2 is special because it doesn't pretend. It gives you the aftermath. It shows the cost. And in doing so, it finishes Popeye's journey not with glory, but with grit. If you felt that, if even one of these forgotten classics lit a fire in you, don't let it die quietly. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who loves real cinema. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because there's a whole world of underappreciated film history still waiting to be unearthed. We'll be right here, rolling the reels back. Until next time.